Ready? It's recording. All right. Hello. Welcome to Kill the Bottle Podcast. Ladies and more, a.k.a. the Yum Yum Foodie with my lovely co-host, Megan Elizabeth. Hello, Megan. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Yeah, you're so high energy today. It's wonderful. I love it. No?
What do you want me to say? I can't talk about it.
I know, it's true. You know what? She's got the golden handcuffs. I'm
energy sucked.
She's energy drained. I love it.
I'm drained of energy. Hopefully this whole episode brings it back.
Oh, it's going to bring it back because it is Kill the Bottle Podcast, and we'll get to our guests in just a second. Today we're going through a fun lineup of wines. These wines are from Stag's Leap. Excuse me, from Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. I'm wearing slippers, Meg. What do you mean? I'm in my house. What do you want me to do?
It looks like dog fur slippers. What are you doing?
Those are horses'
hair.
hair.
Put on some shoes. Be respectful.
These are shoes. Really?
Oh, you're wearing slippers.
So we're drinking wines from Stag's Leap.
He lives over here.
Wine Cellars. Listen.
All right, say it again.
For the third time. Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. Right now we're drinking a little Sauvignon Blanc from the Avita Vineyards. We'll get into a deeper dive in just a second with our guest. So that's it, Megan. You were visited by that character from What We Do in the Shadows, the like energy draining vampire. Is that what?
I don't know what that is, but yes.
You haven't seen that show?
No.
Oh, hey, okay. Anyway, I'm not even going to get into it. You're missing out on life. I
just finished The Bear. Give me a break.
You just finished. Yeah, you need a break after that. You need like a cigarette.
I'm
you need
stressed out.
All of these wines behind us and a cigarette after watching The Bear. Speaking of all the wines behind us, we have a really special guest with us today. As I mentioned, we're drinking wine from Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, and with us today is the winemaker at Stag's Leap Wine Cellar, a gentleman. I like to say gentleman because I met him and he was a true gentleman. Welcome to Kill the Bottle Podcast, Mr. Marcus Notaro. Hello, Marcus.
Hey, it's wonderful to be here. Looking forward to the discussion and looking forward to tasting some wine with you.
Are you wearing slippers too?
No, I've got my boots on.
Thank you.
It's my time we just started harvest season, and so a lot of my time right now I'm spent tromping around in vineyards, so I definitely have my boots on today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I is it a little early for that, Marcus? Just because I'm asking. I was in Napa last week for like half a day, and I was on a vineyard in Oakville, and they were already like pulling and plugging. Like it was I don't want to say full speed ahead, but it was starting to.
Yeah, certainly with white varieties, especially the earlier white varieties like Sauvignon Blanc. We actually just started picking today. And it is a little early. We had a few weeks of some pretty warm temperatures there in July, and that kind of pushed things along. So I wouldn't say that we're like super early. We're maybe like a week earlier than what we would normally do with Sauvignon Blanc. But no, there's a lot of energy in the valley now. You can see, vins going around up and down the valley, a lot of tractors, and, the crews are all excited, and we're getting going. We got going this morning.
Well, I can see your rosy color. So yeah, no, you've definitely been out in the vineyard lately. So I mentioned to the guests that we're sipping right now. So guys, we're gonna go through a lot of wine today. So it's good for us and even better for you. It'll be even better for you once you taste them. But it's gonna be a fun show drinking wine. Can you tell me a little bit? We have the 2023 Avita Sauvignon Blanc. So is this what you're picking now?
Well, yes, that's what those grapes, but for the 2024 vintage.
Correct. Yes.
But yeah,
fair.
We started to pick Sauvignon Blanc. We've been producing that wine since like late 70s, early 80s. Avita is a Greek water goddess that is often seen, or Celtic, it's often seen carrying fruit. We've got this vineyard in the Oakville area, which isn't too far from Stag's Leap, that we largely dry farm, so it's a bit of our homage to her. But Napa Valley Sauvignon Blanc is pretty interesting. It's really flavorful. And what we try to get in this particular wine is this kind of a complex style. It has some grapefruity grass along with some more like tangerine and guava notes. And that's really the characters that our vineyards give us. I ferment most of this in like 2/3 of it in stainless steel tanks, like nice and cool. And that's what really retains the nice, bright, fresh fruit character. But with all our wines, what's really important to me is how the wines taste. Like when you put the wine in your mouth and you swallow it, like what's there. I want it to have a long and lingering aftertaste. And so like with a wine like Avita, I ferment about 1/3 of it in older French oak barrels. And that's what gives the wine a little bit more of a length and a little bit more of a texture, let's say.
So for the folks listening at home, what led to this, to us getting to chat with Marcus is I went to a tasting with him here in Los Angeles, and went through pretty much what we're going to be what we're talking about today. A couple of older vintages as well, but it was a really great experience. Chatting with you in person about it, and then going through that profile. So I always encourage people, when you have an opportunity to go to a vineyard or when you're in Napa or whatever, get in front of somebody who has a lot of wine knowledge, and they can make it as basic or as intricate for you depending on your level, and you get to kind of go through that experience. And I thought Marcus in particular was just great at explaining things to somebody who knows a little bit about wine to somebody who doesn't know anything about wine. So I'm glad that prompted this experience. I wanted to ask you. So you started making wine originally in Washington State, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Now, when you're talking about taste, when you're talking about like the Sauv Blanc, is there anything that you tasted or a wine that you had that was your the light bulb going off that you said, hey, I want to start making wines that remind me of this, or in this if I can make something this good, I'm going to do it?
Sure. It's all, it's called catching the wine bug, and most all people in winemaking have caught the wine bug at some part of their life and decided that this was their passion and this is what they wanted to do. I grew up around wine. My dad was a home winemaker. We're Italian. And he used to make these like really high octane Zinfandels at home. And it was always fun. But again, as a kid, I liked more being around the table than really like tasting the wine. But when I went to school, I went to the University of Washington there in Seattle. I was studying engineering. I have an engineering degree.
Hey, that's useful.
To get through college, I worked at this Italian restaurant outside of Seattle, and the owner was from Bari, and he was really passionate about wine. And if we had a good night, he would open like nice bottles of wine off of the wine list so that we could taste them and we could learn about them. And I remember tasting it was a Barolo that just it told me the stories about Piemonte and tasting the wine and the complexity. And it was Bruno Giacosa, and when I would show it to our guests or I would bring it out just to someone in the restaurant, they would just go crazy and they would love it. It would prompt all these stories. So that would be the one wine that was kind of like that aha moment, like, wow, okay, wine really is interesting. There's history involved, there's grapes involved, terroir. And that was the one that kind of like, was that first kind of stepping stone. And there were some other stepping stones that kind of got me into more of the production and the technical aspect of it. But if there was one wine, that's probably it.
Yeah, it's yeah.
So when you were in engineering school, you didn't see this. This wasn't your future, or was this it?
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I figured that engineering was a problem-solving degree.
Yeah.
And that when I figured out what I wanted to do, that would hopefully be useful. In the end, it actually has been useful sometimes. Winemaking in the end is about a lot of stuff. It's farming, reacting to Mother Nature, and there's a little bit of chemistry. There's a little bit of microbiology, but a lot of it is just kind of like recognizing flavors and recognizing like what's going on, both in the field and in the fermenter, and then making the necessary adjustments. So.
Yeah, you're
I did
like
not
an expert.
get an engineering degree.
No, I have zero.
But there's been several times we've talked to winemakers who have degrees and did not see themselves doing this, but they have come in handy. I don't think any of my degrees would come in handy with winemaking.
Well, I mean, no, you're like you in your current job, which I can't say. You're used to rejection. So I mean, the wines and the grapes being, a bad bunch of grapes won't mess you up. You'll be ready for it.
Okay. See, look at that.
See, look at that. No sour grapes.
6 years of college.
no sour. How many years of debt? That's the question.
6 years of debt.
6 years of debt. And I also want to mention to the guys listening at home or ladies listening at home. So the Avita that we just had is it's also like in a killer price point. It's about $35 retail, and I can't stress how good of a wine that is in this price point. It is just beautiful. I don't know. I always characterize Napa Sauvignon Blanc by its minerality and the guava notes, because for some reason the first time somebody told me about guava notes, and me being Cuban and I love guava, I started to taste it in Sauvignon Blanc, and when I find that characteristic, I fall in love with it. And this has all of the fun shite that I like in Sauvignon Blanc. This is like the kind of thing that when it's hot as hell, like right now, and you pull up to the vineyard and they give you that first pour, you're like, yes, this is what I need in my life. So, Megan. Oh, Megan finished. Hold on, I got to pour her the Caria. Here we go. Can you bring your glass over here?
Yeah, sorry.
I'm Coravining it because I'm very fancy. I have a Coravin for white wines and a Coravin for red wines. You know, trying to not cross pollinate here. There we go. All right.
Thank you.
So
make some rosé if you did.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
We're in.
So the also folks listening at home, if you could tell us a little bit about this, Marcus, the winery's founded in 1970, which is it's been around for a minute, but it was also one of the wines showcased in the tasting of Paris in 1976, and I know there's a great story behind it. And what can you share with the listeners about that?
Well, sure. Well, when the winery was founded, it was founded by a man named Warren Winiarski, who he had caught his wine bug in Italy while on sabbatical. He was a college professor, moved his family out here in the 60s, and was looking for land. He tasted the homemade wine from a man named Nathan Fay, who the Fay vineyard we're going to taste in a little bit, which was the first vineyard planted to Cabernet Sauvignon here in what is now Stag's Leap. Had his aha moment. The characters and the quality of that homemade wine was what he was looking for in Napa Valley Cabernet. There happened to have been 40 acres of land for sale right next door to the Fay Vineyard, which is what he bought, and planted Cabernet Sauvignon, called the vineyard the Stag's Leap Vineyard. And remember, at this time, Napa Valley was still not really what it is today. There was a lot of, prunes were more valuable than Cabernet Sauvignon, let's say, but there was some new energy. People were still kind of struggling from way back, the challenges of prohibition, but new wineries were starting, like Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, among others. And there was a British wine merchant named Stephen Spurrier who had an American partner named Patricia Gallagher, and they had a wine shop in Paris. And they had visited Napa and had seen this kind of new excitement. And they noticed that there was a lot of Americans and Brits that were visiting their wine shop and attending like education classes. So they thought the bicentennial was coming, right, 1976, that they could maybe introduce some of these wines from Napa Valley to their guests. But nobody knew where Napa Valley was. I mean, there was really just Burgundy and Bordeaux for quality, and that's it. So they organized a tasting, invited 20 renowned French wine judges to their wine shop for a tasting of these New World wines. And when the judges arrived, they asked if it was okay to include some of the wines from their wine shop and do the tasting completely blind so that nobody knew what it was. The judges agreed. Of course, they went and pulled the finest Burgundies and the finest Bordeaux off the wine shop.
Of course, why not cheat?
To put into the tasting. There was one writer that came. His name was George Tabor, who wrote for Time magazine. He knew what the order of the wines was, and he documented what happened. And of course, what happened was first they tasted the Burgundies or the Chardonnays, and it was the Chateau Montelena 1973 Chardonnay that had won in the Burgundy tasting. And then for the Bordeaux tasting, it was the 1973 Stag's Leap Wine Cellars SLV, Stag's Leap Vineyard Cabernet, that won in that tasting. So Mr. Tabor wrote an article, and I happen to actually grab, I have a copy of the original Time magazine.
Oh my God.
That is so cool.
And this is how innocent it was. So here's the article. It appears on page 56 next to a Roger Staubach tire commercial. But that little article called The Judgment of Paris, documenting this great victory over, by the Americans over what the French were most known for, went viral. It got picked up by news organizations around the world, documenting this great American victory. And for vintners and grape growers here, that was the defining moment. It kind of gave Napa Valley a definition, like, yes, we can, in confidence, we can compete on the worldwide stage with Chardonnay, with Cabernet Sauvignon, and really was the inspiration that kind of got things going here in Napa Valley.
Yeah, I mean, and it was that story is what led to the film Bottle Shock, which loosely depicts what happened in that time period at Chateau Montelena. And I remember, at that time when I watched that movie for the first time, my wine knowledge was way more limited than it is now. And then I start taking a deep dive, and I'm like, well, fuck me, Stag. Why didn't they talk about Stag's Leap in the movie? They just talked about Chateau Montelena. Anyway, I was like, wait a second, hold on.
Maybe there's a part 2 to come.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a part 2 to come. Who knows?
When you get a job or you get offered a job at a winery like this, I can imagine with great power comes great responsibility. There is a level of pedigree. There's an honor system. It's just holy shit. You're going to be making wine at Stag's Leap. How did the job come about? And how is how do you feel or put pressure on yourself to keep standards so high?
Well, the opportunity came about, Warren Winiarski, when he was 78, realized that his kids, didn't want to take on the business. So he was looking for someone to take on the winery. He reached out to a friend of his, Marchese Piero Antinori from Tuscany, who, of course, Antinori's been making wine in Italy since 1385.
Only.
And at the time, for Marchese, it was a little too much to take on by himself, but he had a partner up in Washington State with St. Michel, and they were making wine together, a winery called Cellars, which is a joint venture between Antinori and St. Michel at the time, and thought together they could purchase Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, which is what happened. And of course, at that time, Marchese said that when the time is right, I'll take full ownership of Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, which is what has happened now. But I was up in Washington State at the time, and I was I was making wine for Cellars. So for this joint venture, I started making those wines in 2003, and the winemaking position at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars came open in 2013. And my kids were small at the time, young at the time. And I really wanted to learn California viticulture. Eastern Washington is a wonderful place for growing grapes, but I really felt like for my development as a viticulturist and as a winemaker, I really wanted to get tied in down to Napa Valley. And so I asked Marchese Piero, and Ted Basler was the CEO at the time for St. Michel. I'm like, listen, I love making the wine at Cellars and Red Mountain. I'd still love to be connected with that. But if you'd have me as the winemaker at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, I'd be honored to take that spot. And they both said, Marcus, if you want to go, you got it. So I started making the wines here starting in 2013. It's a wonderful property. It's a wonderful history. The vineyards here are incredible. I've always had a great relationship with the winemaking team at Antinori, particularly Renzo Cottarello, who's their chief winemaker. Been working together with Renzo for 20 years. And certainly when I took on the winemaking position here, where he was also involved being a part owner, that was something that was very important to me, and certainly gave me a lot of confidence in coming down, that I knew that I had a friend that's a great winemaker that could help me in learning the ropes here and making the adjustment to making wine in Napa Valley.
That's crazy, because if you think about it, all you had to do was ask. And so many times we go through life and we're like, oh, should I ask for this, or should I ask? And you've like, shit, you just asked. And
can
who
I
knows?
have $1 million?
I don't have $1 million. I'll give you a
I
million.
tried to ask.
I'll give you $1 million Turkish dollars. Well,
I have a feeling if I went up there, it's like, can I make some wine? They'd be like,
not so much.
There's a vodka distillery down the road. Why don't you head over there?
A professional vodka taste tester, Megan. Speaking of taste testing,
I need to know about this wine because this might be one of my favorite things we've ever had.
This is delicious. Yeah, it's the Caria Chardonnay.
And I never say that. That's literally. I'm never.
Yeah,
say
she
that.
never says that. She just drinks like a Roomba vacuum.
Yeah.
And inhales the wine.
And
usually,
this one I'm like taken aback. Like,
it is lovely. What can you tell us about the Caria Chardonnay?
Okay. Well,
first of all, am I
Caria,
pronouncing it right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. You got it. Caria. It's a Greek word meaning graceful, which really fits with the style of what we're trying to produce here. As with any wine, the grapes are a real important component. And for this Chardonnay, we're mostly sourcing grapes from the cooler parts of Napa Valley. So down in Carneros, which is right next to that big air conditioner of San Pablo Bay, Chardonnay there has a lot of brightness to it, almost like a banana peel, really bright acidity.
mm-hmm.
Our founder, Warren Winiarski, he has a vineyard in Coombsville, which is you were just in Napa. So that's in the hills just to the east of the actual city of Napa.
Mm.
And that vineyard produces more of a honeysuckle, like a white peach Chardonnay, a little more minerality. We get a little bit of grapes from Oak Knoll, the same vineyard or area where we grow Sauvignon Blanc, and that's a little bit more of you get more of your traditional characters of Chardonnay, more apple and melon and pear. And then a good portion comes from the Antinori Vineyard up on Atlas Peak. So when you get up in the mountains, both with Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay, things kind of change a little bit. You get a little bit more sunlight in the hills. It's not quite as hot, but it's a little bit warmer at night. And the soils up there are really volcanic. And so for Chardonnay, that's where you get more of a lemon lime type characteristic and a little bit more of a richness. So with Caria, I'm trying to really find the right proportion. I want you to smell those fruit characters, those floral characters, those mineral characters. I do ferment it in mostly in French oak barrels, but only about a third of those barrels are new. I just want to give the wine just a little bit of a kiss of wood, like a little bit of clove, a little bit of cedar, but hopefully nothing that's really like too strong. And then the wine has just a little bit of a creamy aftertaste. But again, I want length on the finish is what's really important. So I want this Chardonnay to both be crisp when you taste it, be flavorful, but also to have like a lasting aftertaste.
What do you love about it, Megan? I'm curious because I love this wine, and I've had it a few times, and I had it, I don't know, when I first went to Stag's Leap like in 2010, and I remember really it like stuck with me how much I love this Chardonnay.
I feel like it tells a story in your mouth.
Yeah,
like it starts, kind of hits here, and it just like, and then he just said the words "kiss," by the way, while I was drinking it, and then my whole mind went to a story of not like a sloppy kiss, like one you don't like, or a peck. It's like a meaningful kiss. So it's doing all this stuff to me right now. I don't know what's going on.
That's such a great description because
it's a story. It starts somewhere and ends somewhere else, and it has a subtle, herby, or I don't have great words for this, but it just ends there. I love that.
And as a wannabe wine nerd, the malolactic fermentation that you have on it is not overpowering. It's not too much. It's just the right amount. For to my taste.
Yeah, just a little bit. It depends on the year, but in the malolactic fermentation, that's what gives the wines the bit of that creamy character. And yeah, you don't want too much. That kind of overwhelms the wine, and maybe a little bit. You just want to find just the right amount that adds complexity, like the dancing around in your mouth, like you were talking about, the different stories, to add complexity to make the story more interesting without it being like the dominating thing.
Oh, yeah. It's so perfect. That's just subtle. Subtle is what I like to call it. Oh, thank you. Have this already.
See, look at that. I give her more wine.
Thank you for that experience. I think that might have been the first time I've really spoken that highly about anything. I am a vodka girl. We're gonna be real. And
so
a tequila girl.
The more it doesn't taste like anything is the more that Megan enjoys it. So let's just get that out
Subtle. There. If I could drink a whole bottle of it, I'm good with it.
No, but it's.
I'm humbled and honored that you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And I know I always stress price point to people, but man, it is in such a great price point. It's just under $40. And I mean, and I was going to ask you, Marcus, how long would this lay down for, this Chardonnay?
Well,
ballpark.
Chardonnay, I think you can hold on to Caria for probably 7-8 years, maybe a decade. Most white wines, though, even going back to Sauvignon Blanc, they are. It's not like we make them to be. You have to drink them within like 2 years, but like Sauvignon Blanc is fresh and fruity. And I would probably recommend, like with that wine, like within 5 years is probably good. But Chardonnay is because they have a little bit more richness to them. Maybe it's the barrel fermentation. They have a little bit more longevity. But I would say this wine is going to be pretty fun to drink within probably a 10-year window.
So you're on your 11th vintage at Stag's Leap. What keeps you like going and excited, from year to year? I'm always so curious about, what keeps it from being mundane or when you feel it's mundane, like what gets you out of it?
No, every year is different. I mean, I love it. This is my 30th harvest overall, and 11th harvest here. And of course my wife hates it because, I'm gone for 6 weeks. But listen, every year is different. And, we kind of react to Mother Nature, and it's every year has its own set of challenges. But again, you're creating something. It's a new thing every year. I mean, we have, there's certain things that I'm trying to get. Like, let's say Sauvignon Blanc. I love that guava character you're talking about. When we taste the Fay Cabernet, Fay has this wonderful perfumey quality that is like a character of the vineyard that I want to get and I want to express it. But the growing season is complicated. Going back to even pruning time and how much rain did we wind up getting. when did we get the rain? And this year, let's say the heat that we had in July, well, what did that do to the grapes? And how do we have to farm them to get the most expressive characters and expressive qualities? All that said, now is kind of game time. So the grapes are all purple, right? And Mother Nature can sometimes in Napa Valley kind of give us a curveball here and there. We usually have these wonderful days where they're warm but not too warm days, and that's great because that brings out the nice ripe flavors in the grapes. And then that cool sea breeze coming down there from San Pablo Bay, starts to blow through here around 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and that cools the grapes off, allows everybody to relax overnight, and then it continues the next day. But what can happen here, we can get the winds can shift. They can come out of the north, and that's a really warm, hot, dry wind, and it can really push ripeness around, gets us on our feet. We have to do things to manipulate the canopies to protect the grapes. We might need to put a little bit more water to irrigate the grapes to keep them going through, to try to get to, in the end, what we want to get are ripe but not overripe grapes that are going to have the most potential expression of the characters of that vineyard. And then it's our job in the cellar to bring out those characters. And depending on what we get in the grapes, you don't do the same thing every year. I mean, there might be some certain protocols. Let's say we're going to destem the grapes, we're going to add yeast, but how we get to the end, particularly with the reds, it really is kind of based on what you're tasting and what you're seeing, and you have to be very open-minded to what you're seeing. You cannot do the same thing every year. Or the wines, we have years that are more tannic, we have years that are more structured, we have years that are softer and fruitier. But I want to make the best dang wine I can for our guests every single vintage. So I have to adjust the winemaking every year to what I'm seeing, and that's what really keeps it really fun and interesting.
Well, you said 30 years, 30 harvests. How has technology helped you in that process? I remember when I met you, you showed me the coolest app. That, if I remember correctly, was it Sun? Was it an app showing you? Yeah. And so so guys listening at home, he had an app where you could see exactly how much sunlight and the angle of the sun on his vineyards, which is, I mean, that's got to be incredible compared to, what you had to do back in the day. How has the technology evolved and helped you in that sense?
Well, listen, technology is a useful tool. I mean, I think both in the vineyards and in the vinification process. Things like that the app I showed you that kind of showed you where the sun was going to be at different times of the year. When you have the opportunity to replant a vineyard is a wonderful tool that wasn't available, let's say 20 years ago. We're able to be a lot more precise in farming these days because, we were able to take overhead pictures, let's say, that kind of show us like where a dry spot might be in the vineyard versus where like a wet spot might be. And then we kind of can adjust the farming to try to even out those spots. In the cellar, there's obviously, it's a lot easier to get, real-time information like what's happening with fermentation, temperatures, being able to, add this or add that. But in the end of the day, I mean, listen, technology is helpful. It's useful, but in what we do, you really still have to be boots on the ground.
Yeah, you can't chat GPT that.
No.
You have to be out there and actually looking with your eyes and seeing like how are the vines taking this? What do I need to do? And the same thing in the cellar. Listen, there's wonderful technology now that's all very much easier to manage fermentations, things like that today. But at the end of the day, it's very important, and I'm always telling this to my young winemakers, you have to go to the tank and you have to taste the tank. And based on what you're tasting, you need to make a decision. You touch the tank, it's like a full experience. So when I'm out in the cellar, you touch the tank, trying to feel what the temperature's at, right? Pour a sample of the wine, smell the fermenting wine, taste it. You have to do that, multiple times a day to kind of watch how the wine evolves, and then alter maybe what you're going to do to try to bring out more of those characters. And that's not something that, you can't get that on an app. It's not
you don't want to be that guy that GPS goes out and you don't know where the hell you're going. You still need to be able to know to get from A to B, but it is nice to know that you can check the traffic, quote unquote, on a particular app. Got it. How do you like your red wine? I'll tell folks what we're having in a second.
I like it.
Yeah. So the wine that we're having now, I consider this the workhorse of Stag's Leap in my world of wine. This is a wine where if I see it on a wine list, I always feel really comfortable ordering it. I've never had a bad vintage of it or a vintage that I didn't like, and I've probably had 10 different vintages of this particular wine. We're gonna drink right now because I'm gonna say a word that leads to us drinking, but it's also a wine that I've been able to buy at Costco in the past.
Oh, no.
Listen,
We have to drink.
We have to drink.
That's the rule when he says Costco.
No, but it's I like it in the sense that it's a wine that's you can find it, but workhorse meaning it is just a great wine, great value. This is the Stag's Leap Artemis, particularly 2021 Artemis. Yeah, talk to me about Artemis. First of all, I love saying Artemis. It's such a fun name to say.
Well, Artemis is the goddess of the hunt. She's the protector of the stag, so obviously is very appropriate for Stag's Leap. But also, for the wine, this is really meant to be a hunt around Napa Valley. I mean, we use wines from our vineyards here at the estate, SLV and Fay, which we're going to taste, Cask 23. But one of the wonderful things about Napa Valley, and I kind of described a little bit about how the weather works, but depending on where Cabernet is grown, it really takes on a different characteristic and a different quality. So I described like the mountains. Cabernet grown in the mountains has a more brambly character to it, has a little bit more darker fruit, has bigger, bolder structures, which is a different character and quality. And let's say that you're going to see in fruit coming from Stag's Leap, which is a little bit more lush, a little bit more soft, not quite as bold. Which is very different from Cabernet, let's say, grown in the southern part of the valley, where it's a little bit cooler, like down in Coonsville or Woodland Valley. Cabernet grown in a cooler climate has more of a red fruit character and a little bit more bright acidity, which is different, let's say, than Cabernet grown as you go up the valley, let's say up to St. Helena, Rutherford, Calistoga, where it's a little bit warmer up there, and Cabernet grown in that kind of an area takes on more black fruit, like black cherry, blackberry, and again, richer, silkier, riper tannin. So with Artemis, that's kind of what we're trying to celebrate. It's like Napa Valley is a wonderful place for this variety. It takes on different characters depending on when it's grown, where it's grown. And so that's where we're sourcing from. And it is primarily Cabernet Sauvignon. Sometimes I'll put in just a little bit of Cabernet Franc or a little bit of Malbec. But it's really meant to be, this is the finest expression of Cabernet Sauvignon for Napa Valley as a whole.
And folks, when I say that something is readily available, I don't mean that it's overproduced in that sense, because there are a few wineries in Napa who I won't mention that I tend to steer people away from, because they only make a couple things, and the couple things that they make you can kind of find everywhere. That is not the case with Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. You have your Artemis, that is something that you can find more abundantly around the U.S. But then you've got wines like what we have in the glass now, which is the Fay Vineyard, and this is a special wine that is one of the things that, like, you go to the winery and you're like, oh, cool. There's some really cool stuff that I get to try that I'm not going to see in as many places. You're going to see it on wine lists at like a nice restaurant, maybe, but it's just not as abundantly found, which is one of the reasons to go to the vineyard too.
Absolutely. So Fay, again, you kind of described Artemis as being from Napa Valley. Now we're going to go into Stag's Leap. So the Stag's Leap district, we're, on the southern part of the valley. And when Nathan Fay, who of course, this is the vineyard who it was named after, he was an early pioneer. He planted Cabernet Sauvignon here in 1961. And at that time, our area was thought to be too cold for Cabernet. It was thought to be from the town of Yountville in the south was more for your, cooler varieties, your white wine varieties, Pinot, things like that. And then north was for Cabernet Sauvignon. But he took a risk, planted Cabernet here anyway, and luckily he did. So later on, when he actually could do like some of the measurements and really understand how the weather works. So we are in the southern part of the valley, maybe about 5 miles north of the actual city of Napa, but on the eastern side, and we're kind of tucked into this wonderful bowl. So we're surrounded by these rocky outcroppings called the Stag's Leap Palisades, and there's a particularly large rocky outcropping above the Fay Vineyard has a big V cut in it. And back when the Native Americans were living and hunting in our valley, they would chase deer. And there's a legend that they had chased the deer up to one side of this big rocky outcropping, and the deer leapt to the other side in order to escape. So that's how our area became known as Stag's Leap. But those rocks and that bowl, when the sun peaks out and starts to warm up in the early afternoon, we've become quite warm here in Stag's Leap, probably about as warm as you see in the northern part of the valley. And that's what brings out these nice ripe flavors in Cabernet. But because we're south, we get the sea breezes here a little bit earlier in the afternoon than you see up valley around 3:30 or 4 o'clock. And then at night, when the low clouds and fog kind of roll into our area, they roll in from the south to the north and then burn off the next morning from the north to the south. So you see more sunlight earlier in the day in the upper part of the valley. But here in Stag's Leap, we're kind of socked into about 9:30. So we have a real extended cooling period. And that's kind of what gives the Stag's Leap district the characteristic of this soft power, like the wines from Stag's Leap. They have richness, they have nice ripe characters, but at the same time, they're not too over the top, they're not too tannic, they're not too overly alcoholic in general, and that's because of that really cool evening. The Fay Vineyard, again, was the first one planted here by Nathan. It was the vineyard that inspired Warren to buy the land next door. It later became part of Stag's Leap Wine Cellars when Mr. Fay was ready to retire in the mid-'80s. It largely needed to be replanted. And so our first vintage producing wine from it was in 1990. And one thing I always find interesting is that this was the vineyard that inspired the SLV vineyard. But in the end, and as we taste these two wines, they have a different personality. They both have a similar character, that kind of soft power, but they have a different flavor, like a different personality. And when you smell Fay, what's special about it is it has this really bright perfume. It has this more of a floral characteristic, like bright berry pie, bright cherry, and then very soft and silky tannin. That is a characteristic of the vineyard. The soil in Fay is a little bit of an older soil. It's been washed down off of those rocky outcroppings that I described, but washed down off the rocks and then kind of transported by a creek. So it's a little bit more of a weathered soil. It has a gray and more of a clumpy character, and Cabernet grown in that dirt here in our area gives you that wonderful perfumey quality. Yeah. That is something that's really unique and fun. You see it in the old wines. I see it in the very young wines as well. And that's what makes it special.
Are both of them? I was reading that that this particular vintage of the Fay is 100% cab. I hate to use like my Texas voice, but I remember being out and about in the world of restaurants and bars. It's like, is it 100% cab? And then like, all right, relax. Some of the best wines from Bordeaux are are like 50% Merlot. But relax, dude. Is there a misconception about that 100% cab that you see with people, or is this wine ever a blend to get a certain flavor profile you want?
Well, listen, I think with anything you're trying to produce the best quality wine that you can. You want to make, if you're making Cabernet Sauvignon, you want to make it the best that you can. And the other Bordeaux varieties, they all have a place. Petit Verdot is really tannic, and it has a floral note. And if you're growing Cabernet in an area where it can tend to be a little bit, let's say, softer, you need to add more structure. Well, that's a variety that you can use for that. Merlot is also something for the opposite, right? If you need if the Cabernet, your area where you're growing Cabernet makes Cabernet so strong, Cabernet Sauvignon so strong that you need to actually add a little bit of Merlot to help to soften the tannin, kind of to soften the impression. So they all have their use. Stag's Leap, though, this is kind of the Goldilocks area for Cabernet Sauvignon. We did have some Petit Verdot planted out here. We've had some Merlot that had made wonderful wines on their own. But I didn't really see where they were making the Cabernet Sauvignon like better or more interesting. But our vineyards are not only Cabernet Sauvignon. We have planted Cabernet Franc, both in Fay and in SLV. And with the idea being Cabernet Franc has a real blue fruit note to it, like blueberries, and it also has a floral character. And I thought that maybe that would even enhance more that perfumey quality of Fay. And then with Cask 23, again, that wine, we haven't got to that wine yet, but that wine is really about complexity. And I think Cabernet Franc it's for me is the one. If you have wonderful Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc is the one variety that it's very versatile and can add complexity. It marries really well with great Cabernet Sauvignon. So we do have that planted. This particular vintage in 21, they're both Fay and SLV are 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, but there have been vintages, particularly your Fay, where I have wound up blending in some Cabernet Franc because I felt like it gave it even more personality and enhanced its characteristics.
Again, I'm going to blend some Cabernet Franc into you when you're down, just to enhance you and make you.
It's gonna take a lot.
It's gonna take a lot. So I told Megan save a little bit of the face so that we can do that side by side. And I know folks at home, you don't get to you're not getting to do this. So give yourself an opportunity. Go to the vineyard and try.
You know what? Go get it. Go get it. Pause this episode.
Pause this episode.
We'll list the wines and then come back and listen and do it with us.
Yeah. So would you guide us through this side by side, please? Just because Megan wasn't with me at that tasting, and I want her to kind of get that experience.
You bet. So SLV is next. We're going to taste this next. So this is the vineyard that won the Paris tasting, and as opposed to that kind of older soil that phase, and these vineyards, listen, they're side by side. Like you walk across like a little ditch to get from one to the next. But the way the water kind of erodes off of those hillsides, that's where your dirt flows and where it winds up getting deposited. That's the real difference. So SLV, as opposed to that older gray soil, it has this red rocky soil. It looks just like the rocks that are up above the hill. When we have big rainstorms in the winter, it's great to drive out there and you see the hill is eroding like directly across where this particular vineyard has been planted. And so it has a different personality. For me, it's more of a dusty cocoa powder character, like black currant, violets. It has a darker, scarierness to it in the aromas and a bigger, bolder structure. So again, they both kind of fall into that Stag's Leap character, but they have a different personality. And those personalities, I think, are really what make the vineyard so special. And that's a character that I really try to express during the vinification, barrel aging, etc.
Yeah, and folks at home, it is a special experience. So the Fay is about $200 a bottle. The SLV, I think it's like $225. Let me see if my memory serves me right. No. The SLV is $250. Sorry, guys. I shorted you $25. So these are definitely wines that are special occasion wines. These are the kind of wines where, if you have your friends that you want to go through this experience,
Go there and get it.
Or shit, just order it.
And then come redo this episode.
I'm not going to say it out loud so you don't pound the wine, but I did see an SLV and I even saw a Cask 23 in behind the plexiglass at this particular place that I like to mention that also sells Artemis called Costco.
Dang it, drink.
But it's not anything that's there every single time. It's one of those where I was like, oh, I was so happy that I saw Cask 23 there one time and I saw SLV there one time because you have to have to been to the vineyard, you have to be into Napa wine to really get excited about seeing that. How do you feel about that side by side? Isn't that fun? Mm-hmm. And just like he said, they're like, I remember, I've been there and I don't remember anymore because it was such a long time ago. But when you showed me on your app, we were looking at the overhead view of that vineyard, and it's like right next to each other.
That's crazy. The difference is crazy that they're that close to each other.
Yeah, and they're both like phenomenal.
Yeah,
in their
own ways. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, I guess. Now, what makes, since they are right next to each other, what makes the price point distinction between these two? Is it yield? Is it? I'm curious.
SLV is a much smaller. Yeah, SLV is a very small vineyard. It's half the size, let's say, of Fay Vineyard.
That'll do it.
So neither vineyard are very big, but SLV is just 34 acres, and the Fay Vineyard is 66.
If there was one grape that you wish would grow well in Napa, that you would just love to play around with, what would it be?
Outside of listen, I've always loved Cabernet Sauvignon. Even when I was in college, before I really was drinking wine, I used to when I was studying, I would drink like black currant tea.
But Nebbiolo is what changed you. Nebbiolo was your light bulb wine.
I know. So, I mean, I what I see being planted more when we're planting, I hate to go back to the same thing, but Cab Franc. I mean, that's the one variety that, as we're looking to how our wines, even like Artemis, how can these wines evolve? How can we make the wines even brighter, give them more freshness, give them even more complexity? And that's the variety we keep going back to. And that's the one that we've been planting in different areas. We're planting some up in the hills, up on Outpeak. We've been planting some at our cooler site vineyards in Winton Valley. We're planting some at our warmer vineyards up in Calistoga, and then obviously out here. And I think that's going to make, as those vineyards come into production, and assuming that they are of the quality that we're expecting, I think it's kind of a game changer. I mean, I'm seeing more Cabernet Franc planted around the valley. I mean, it does well in retaining freshness when we have some of these crazy heat events. Cab Franc's that one variety that can kind of pull that wine that maybe wants to be a little bit too much. He can kind of pull it back, and I think it's got a lot of potential here.
I found like Cab Franc is like the nerd wine. If you have a friend that's a sommelier, you don't know what to buy them a weird Cab Franc from somewhere. Because I feel like every time I'm out with sommeliers, they just order. They don't even go to any other section in the wine list. They're looking for whatever the Cab Francs are, and that's just what they order at the table. I don't know why. So yeah, just buy them a funky Cab Franc, and now we know what to get you: a Barolo, a Cab Franc.
Well,
What there are some places up in the Central Coast of California that are growing Nebbiolo. It tastes very different than Barolo, but I gotta give them an A for effort. There is some fun, unique stuff there. You just can't expect it to taste like Barolo. There's only one thing. There's only one Barolo.
Then you can't give him an A, Eddie.
A for effort, motherfucker.
I don't care about effort. I want it right. What? An A for perfection.
An A for perfection. So what was your favorite between these two?
The second one. The SLV?
Yeah, the SLV.
SLV.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm like, I try to so this is another thing I love about these wines is that if a wine has to be paired with food, I mean it's great, but if it's only tastes its best when it's with food, I'm like, no, I need something that I can lie to myself and maybe put like one piece of cheese and kill a whole bottle of wine.
No, this could be dinner. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm trying to say. This could be fermented grape soup.
This is dinner. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. No, but it is. That's like just one of my things. Like you're like, oh yeah, this Burgundy is good with coq au vin and this, and I'm like, yo, I want to be able to taste it on its own, and I don't care that it smells like feet. I want it to taste good. That's just my
wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Do you guys, are you hiring? Can I come up there? I want to go to harvest season.
We always need a harvest crew, so get up here.
Are you allowed to just do 2 days?
In about 3 weeks.
Okay. Are you allowed? I've tried for years because we've been to a lot of places.
This is on her bucket list.
It's on my bucket list. Just like a couple day, come up and just get my ass kicked. Can we do this? Can we make it happen?
We can have, we always can use people.
I'll sleep in the barracks. I don't know what you call them.
The barracks.
I'll sleep in the vineyards. I don't care. I just really want to experience getting my ass kicked because everyone says it's like, it's great. It's fun, but it's really hard and everyone will just outdo me. I have a feeling like by everything and I'll just look like an idiot, but I really want to try it.
Just being around. I mean, people always ask me when the best time to visit Napa Valley is, and of course the harvest time is a great time for people to visit because you can see the grapes being harvested, the smells around the winery, around the cellars, and just all the action. I mean, it really is a great time to be here. And of course another great time to be here is kind of the opposite. I think like in February, March, when everything's green and the mustard's rolling and not quite as many folks. There's not maybe the smells of harvest and everything that's happening.
Oh my God.
The smells of harvest is so kind when you say that. The smells of harvest. Trust me, I know what harvest smells like, and it can be great, and it can also be like cow shit. So, yeah. So, but it is nostalgic. Megan, go do harvest.
I had a joke.
Oh yeah,
it was really bad.
Do it.
It's a grape time to visit.
It is.
Grape.
I got you. I got the dad joke. It was good. It's good.
I'm gonna see myself out.
Yeah.
I don't want to just watch the action though. I want to be in on the action. So we'll arrange it. I want to do this.
How much does like an average workforce in a winery increase from, before harvest to like, how does that work? Do you have people like on the phone? You're like, yo, we need help, or how does that work on the logistics side?
So there's a wonderful mix of folks that come to Napa Valley from around the world to experience harvest. And, think of it like nowadays, even with students, let's say, that are studying to be viticulturists or winemakers, it's very common to do a kind of a bounce from hemisphere to hemisphere, because then you can get like 2 harvests in a year. So maybe you'll run down to New Zealand or Argentina and work harvest there, and then bounce back to the Northern Hemisphere, whether you're over in Europe or in Napa Valley. So, there's people from around the world that come here just to work harvest. I mean, we all are posting on Wine Jobs or other places where we're looking for folks. And yeah, typically, like for us here, we probably increase by about 1/3 the size of our crew, because you do really especially for red wine making, it really is it's not like a 8-hour process. Like you're doing something in the morning and then you're doing something about 12 hours later. And you really do have an extended time. Wineries, there's usually people, I'll just use here, for example, we have people here probably 18 hours a day or during 18 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have like a morning crew and then we have like an afternoon crew, just to be able to cover all of the logistics of, receiving the grapes and pressing them if they're whites or destemming them if they're reds, and then all the way through to, emptying the tanks when they're done fermenting, getting things cleaned up. And in a winery is half the battle, especially during harvest. There's just a lot going on.
It's a little different than your dad's home winemaking.
It's a little
he's
bit
telling me
different.
that they don't have time to train my ass.
No.
That's
They're
what
like,
he's
just
trying to
get
say.
your
He's
ass
like,
over
you can
there.
come watch. I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
I see Megan with like some shears and she's like cutting a grape.
I'm ready.
Cutting
ready.
little
What do I do
now? I think we need to shoot that. We need just
what
like
do I do now?
a week's worth of
Like,
Megan's.
you need to go home.
One also,
Here's a bottle just to go home.
just please. Here you go. Here's a bottle of Cask 23. It
Just go
it costs
home.
a lot of. Just get out of here, please. Just go somewhere else.
I would
please.
hinder one day. I have a 4-day weekend coming up. I'll keep in touch.
Well, you got to imagine any mistake like that, especially with the cost of a ton of Cabernet Sauvignon, let alone from Stag's Leap District. Like a mistake can cost a lot of money. You really have to have your game face on, I guess. Well,
I mean, we're all I like with my crew, or I like my entire cellar team to be. They are all, in my eyes, they're all the winemakers, because they're the ones that are touching the grapes, fermenting the wines, really making all of the magic happen. And that's what I tell my crew. Like, you guys are the winemakers, and that's the way that you need to approach how you're doing today's pump over or today's pressing, to really take ownership over what you're doing, because the things that you do have an impact over the characters and the quality of that finished wine.
So before we get to our next wine, this was one of the wines that the first time I visited Napa was like an eye-opening wine for me, having not known that much about wines from the valley. I'd only had maybe 5 or 6 of the uber premium wines from different vineyards in Napa. And I remember going to Stag's Leap, and they're like, oh, we're going to, I did the full on tasting, and they're like, oh, this is the Cask 23. And, I'm like, thank God it was like our first winery in the day, over on the Silverado Trail, which, by the way, guys, the drive to Stag's Leap is so beautiful. It is one of the most beautiful pieces of road, in my opinion, in the U.S. that I've ever driven. But the Cask 23 was one of those eye-opening wines for me, as far as, and I remember now thinking back, it was the 2000 vintage that I had based on when I visited the winery, and holy shit, it was so damn good. So anyway, please, Cask 23, talk to me.
You bet. So Cask 23, the first vintage of this was produced in 1974. And basically, our founder, Warren Vernarski, and he had Andrei Telechev consulting for him. Andrei was a famous consultant, helped a lot of those young wineries in Napa Valley.
You can be a
they were
consultant,
tasting through
Megan.
all of the barrels of SLV and came across one that they thought was like so superior in quality that they decided to bottle it on its own and then named it after the barrel or the cask that it was being aged in. So it's being aged in barrel number 23. So until the Fay Vineyard became part of Stag's Leap Wine Cellars then, so up until 1990, when cask was bottled, it's not necessarily bottled every year, it was just like the finest expression of the Stag's Leap Vineyard, of the SLV vineyard. But after Fay became part of the winery, and I think Warren very quickly realized that, okay, oh my gosh, so I have these different vineyards, or these vineyards that have a different personality, and one of them is a little bit richer and more powerful, and the other one being SLV, and of course Fay being a little bit more elegant. You have like just the perfect ingredients, let's say, from a vineyard standpoint, to make a wine that's both wonderfully complex, meaning with lots of different flavors, but also to have wonderful length and longevity, particularly on the taste. So aromatically, what we're looking for in cask, again, I want you to smell and taste both of the Fay and SLV in the same glass. So the perfumey note from Fay, right? The floral character, along with those darker fruit characters, the currants and the violets together aromatically. But the real key to cask is going to be the taste. So what we're looking for
So
is
elegant.
Is lasting and lingering taste. And that's the real trick of a wine like that, is to try to find the right blend of Cabernet that has richness, but also restraint. Sometimes I think of it, I haven't really rode a surfboard very much, but let's say you did. And if you move, if you're right on that fine line, then you can just keep on going. And that's the way you think of the finish. If you have a wine that has just enough richness and also some finesse to it, then the flavors are just going to sing and just kind of keep lasting over and longer again. So this wine, I'm looking for the finest grapes from both of these individual vineyards. I'm going to ferment them, all the grapes, to make the best wines that I can. But in the end, I'm looking for those few blocks that have the Fay character, SLV character, but have that lasting length. And then I work to try to find just that right blend together between those two to make a wine that's got persistence and complexity.
Yeah, this wine is ridiculous.
Really, really good.
it's really good. It's a special wine. It's in a special price point. It's $325 a bottle. This is the kind of wine where people ask me like, hey, I want to buy a wine for somebody's, let's say, wedding or anniversary. This is kind of like the perfect wine in the sense where you buy it for the year that they were married, and like you drink this on your 10-year wedding anniversary, and you can also drink it on your 20-year wedding anniversary. Because these are designed to they could lay down and just evolve.
Sure. Now listen, the wines from our area, from our vineyards, have wonderful potential for ageability. Yeah, and I do go through the cellar or the library, often.
Stop teasing.
I'm always asked about, hey, Marcus, I've got a bottle of, 1995 SLV. How's it doing? And I think it's it's a really hard part of my job. It is to know the right answer to that. Like, you should drink this, or this wine, you can hold on to it for a while. But I think going back to our vineyard area, particularly that cooling influence that really retains wonderful, bright, natural acidity in the grapes and really lends to giving us grapes that can be made in a very ageable style. And our wines do evolve. I feel like, the first evolution takes place maybe over the first 7 or 8 years. That's a really fun time to open a bottle of Fay or SLV or cask. The wines are still very young, but they're kind of a little bit more polished, let's say, and they're really complex. But the wines that are in their peak right now are probably the wines from the mid 90s, like 95, 96, 97. You open those wines up now, it's kind of like the reason why you age wine. They're soft, they're plush, but you still get that real primary fruit, and they're wonderfully complex. And I think like these wines that we're trying today from 21 and the 20 vintage have every ounce of potential ageability as those wines that are now, in their 25 to 30 years old.
It's like
I'm offended by you.
Why are you offended?
Because if anyone wants to buy me one of these wines, I'm not married. You can still get me this bottle of wine.
You know what?
Saying, why do you have to be married?
I was going to ask Marcus if if the owner was retired and single. Jesus, I was trying to help you out.
Hi, I'm Megan.
Hi. Hey. We know Marcus isn't, but you know what I mean?
Where is he? I just want you to...
He's in Italy. Okay.
If you could just get this clip of my face and send it there. Is he single?
I don't know. I'm sure he's not. If he's single, I mean, he might be.
I don't care. Just send me the wine.
Just send you the wine. They did. You're trying it.
My 10-year anniversary of my divorce. I'm glad to take a bottle of wine.
But these, you know what it is? It is, Marcus, for like at least when I started getting into wine, it was a thing where people talk about like, wines from California they don't age. You drink old world European wines if you want to drink old wines, blah, blah, blah. And I've been blessed to have had, Megan had it too, some vintages from the late 70s. And I've had wines from Napa in the late 80s to the 90s. And that is a bunch of horse shit. Anybody that tells you that there aren't wines that come from the United States that have that level of ageability, like some of the greatest French wines or wines from Spain in the world. It is complete horseshit, guys. So just put that out there. If you find something great that you like and you have the ability of buying more than one bottle, buy a few of them and, drink one every 5 years and see what it tastes like.
Apply those rules to marriage too. When you find some you like,
just find one you like. Just try it again in a few years. Is
every 5 years?
Every 5 years. Every 5 years. You're
what is this wine doing to me?
So Cast 23 will get Megan Frisky. That's normally the...
I'm just making fun of married couples.
Thanks.
Congratulations on your marriage, Marcus.
So, winemaker by day. What are you drinking that is not wine the minute you're like, I just need to get the hell away from wine for a minute? What is your go-to drink?
Well, look, I love wine, but during harvest, like this time of the year when I go home, I definitely drink a beer. I want something that's not too crazy. And my go-to harvest beer has always been Anchorstein. And,
good stuff.
And of course they stopped.
I was like, they went out of business. You picked the wrong brewery.
So just to give you an example how I crave this beer during harvest. Last year I didn't know really what was going on. We're busy during harvest and I'm not like keeping up on what's happening. And I'm like, damn it, where's the Anchorstein? And I finally found like this one store in Napa that had it. And I walk in and there it was, the 6-pack of Anchorstein. And it was like $20 for a 6-pack. I'm like, oh my God. But
give me 50 of them.
I'll take them all.
But anyway, I need like if it's not, obviously I can't find Anchor, then a nice Pilsner or something that's not too rich, too heavy, but a nice quenching beer is what I crave. I don't drink a lot of beer, but one beer coming home after being out in the vineyards all day or tasting grapes all day is something that I gotta have.
I love that story.
Are you a cocktail person at all?
Not too much.
I find that's a common trend in winemakers. They're like beer drinkers.
Get a little crazy when I get a cocktail.
Yeah. Marcus will start running nude through the vineyards after like 2 martinis.
I find beer's refreshing too. Like, what's sad that this might be alcoholism, to be honest. But when I'm hungover, really? Beer is great. It feels like it's rehydrating
it's like breakfast.
But I feel you.
There's a quote of like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie Pumping Iron. They're like, Arnold, what do you drink? Do you drink milk? Do you like all these the press is asking me, I don't drink milk, I drink beer. Yeah. He's like, milk is for babies. Mm-hmm. That's what he said. I'm like, yeah, you drink beer. That's what you drink the day after your hangover. It is a meal.
Yeah, it helps me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe I should. Never mind. Cut back.
It's so true. Anchorstein was so good and then just went away. That fucking sucks.
Buy it. Do it again.
Huh? Well, no, maybe. Yeah, I'm gonna go buy Anchorstein. Let's
do it. Put them back.
All right. When we're done with the call, let's talk about an investment opportunity. All right. So it happens at the end of every show. We have an investment talk with. So guys listening at home, please check out stagsleepwinecellars.com. If you want to get a hold of some of these wines, that is the best place to check them out, learn about the wines. Of course, the next time I'm up in the valley with more than like 4 hours of time that I have to run in and run out, I am going to visit you. I'm going to stalk you, Marcus. Not during harvest. But I'm gonna definitely go and I'm gonna be like, where's Marcus? And if they tell me no, I'm gonna sneak around. I'm gonna find your office.
Why are you gotta be so
I'm gonna
creepy?
leave an empty anchor steam by the door. That's how you'll know it's me. Megan's gonna get a job at the winery. So, Marcus, we like to end the show the same way every single time. We're going to thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us here on Kill the Bottle Podcast. As time is the only thing we don't get back in life. So, sincerely, thank you so much for sharing some of your story, talking about these amazing wines. Thank you, Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, for sending these incredible wines for Megan and I to try. If you want to recreate this at home, like I said, go to stagsleepwinecellars.com, get all the 411, get your hands on these bottles. I say, if you have the means, get more than one so you can always put one away and try it again later. Don't do that with the Sauvignon Blanc. That's something you probably want to drink within the first few years, guys. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. I'm not sitting there aging Sauvignon Blanc. It's hot outside. Drink that shit. So guys, please subscribe. Thank you again, Marcus. See you guys next week. Kill a Bottle Podcast. Enjoy some wine.